Today we're simply going to trim this quilt and get it ready to bind. It is something that some people just dread, but there is no reason to dread it. The middle was just 4 leftover squares, and then I added a border and a big duck border and 2 edges of red. And I love this little quilt. In the olden days, we would just take scissors and trim it. That's what my mom taught me, but no, that's not how we do it anymore. I like to make sure my cutting table is all cleared off so that I can spread the quilt out. I like to put it on an angle because I can make it straight and have more of it. I take where the skinniest part is, where it's been loaded on my long arm. I start with that on the right hand side of me. It's on the left hand side of the screen. And I get ready to start cutting the border. And it doesn't really matter which border you start with, so you can start with whichever border you prefer, but that's where I like to start. I'm lining up my long, big ruler. I have 3 different brands, so it's not that I recommend one brand. You just need a really good long ruler. And I make sure it's lined up. I set it against where the edge of the binding is, and I keep my hand on it taut. And I cut all 3 layers at the same time. It makes it really, really straight. And as I pull it towards me, it has a tendency, because of the weight of the quilt, to pull off the table. So I make sure I kind of hold it with my belly. I make sure that it's straight and that nothing's being pulled. And as soon as I'm sure and it looks really straight, I'm looking at the ruler both ways, you can see me pointing, then I just cut it. I cut straight off the fabric, making a big, giant, crooked strip to put with my scraps. This quilt happens to be pretty square. Sometimes you'll need to trim a quilt that isn't perfectly square. And when that happens, it's trickier. You'll have to decide how to square it up the best you can. You can trim the corners, you can cut it so that maybe a little batting shows, but that it will hide in the binding. It's really, really hard. The best thing, of course, is to make your quilts so that they are square and that they do square up nicely. Maybe you're a beginner, or maybe there's a quilt that you made years and years ago before you had the ability to make square quilts. So what you do then is you just make them as square as you possibly can, and then you just decide to be happy anyway. They will still give someone a really warm hug. Notice as I use this ruler how when there's a little bit of a border with great contrast, you can actually see how straight it is. See right there? You can see that it looks really good, not just next to it where you're going to cut it, but you can look on the ruler as you go up and check it with the border. So if you've sewn straight, it just really does help as you do this trimming. So right here I'm showing you there's a little bit of batting showing. It'll hide under the binding, just like I was saying. Apparently whoever quilted this, gee, I wonder who. Yeah, it was me. Then maybe I had a bobble there, and that's how you fix the bobble. So this is our last side, and we just trim it as straight as we can. Now, when I'm making a wall hanging, I'm really careful to do this, which is square up the corners exactly. And they're very square. If they were crooked, like a little off, I would trim it. But these are perfectly square. But when you have a wall hanging and it's going to hang on your wall, or a table topper, if those corners aren't square, you're going to see it every single time you look at it. So it's important to try to do that accurately. Even if I've already chosen my binding way ahead, when I'm done quilting and trimming, I like to audition it to make sure it's exactly what I want. And this red holds those ducks right in the pond, so it's exactly what I want. Here is the quilt, all bound, all ready to give comfort to some child. If you want to learn how to do machine binding, you can watch our video right here. Stay merry and creative.